Welcome, everyone. Um, I'm Michael Rafanti. I'm the chair of CIIS Dissertation Committee. And so I wanted to welcome everyone here for CIIS presentation on advancing emancipatory pedagogy. So the agenda for the next couple of hours is that we'll start off with some introductions of the committee members, and then Chip will do his presentation, and then we'll move into sort of a Q&A session with the committee, and then time permitting, I'm hoping that there'll be the ability for others in the audience who have questions or comments based on Chip's presentation. After that, then the committee will go into a breakout room for deliberation, at which time we come back with an announcement. So anyway, that's the agenda for today. So I think please go ahead and get started with the introductions. Again, I'm Michael Rafanti. I've been teaching at CIIS for like 17 years as sort of as a part-time faculty member. I'm the Dean of Education at Antioch University and a former third grade teacher. So which definitely has some connection to Chip's work. And yeah, I'm really happy to have been working with Chip over the last few years. So I'm based in Tacoma, Washington. So Leslie, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'd be happy to. So happy to see so many CIIS faces. I'm Leslie Jackson. I'm calling in from Detroit, Michigan. So really happy to be here with Chip on this auspicious occasion today. I've been teaching at CIIS for several years in the Transformative Studies Ph.D. program, as well as in the Women's Spirituality program. But I'm also core at Antioch in the EDD online program. My work centers a lot around transformative learning and pedagogy, with a real big focus on healing justice, self-care, spiritual activism. And of course, one of my favorites is just a focus on doctoral student support and development. So for all you PhD, EDD students working your way through the process, proud of you and so proud of Chip. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Leslie. Andrew.
Yatowi Hokesakus, good day, relatives. Andrew Jolivet. What a great day to all be together and recognize and learn from Chip's wonderful work. So excited to be here. I'm a professor and department chair of ethnic studies at UC San Diego and director of Native American and Indigenous Studies here. And a lot of my work centers around research justice or research methodologies, critical mixed race studies, queer studies, and a number of different other areas. So really looking forward to today and this discussion of this fabulous work.
Thank you, Andrew. And so I think without further ado, we'll, Chip, please, and you can introduce yourself if you'd like. I know that's probably gonna be part of your presentation, I imagine. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all for being here. I want to say thank you to my committee, to Michael, to Andrew, to Leslie. I want you all to know that, each of you to know that I chose you for this committee because you are my heroes and you are my shiro. The work you do, the scholarship you have, the excellence you bring to the context of education is what I aspire to. Thank you for sharing in this experience with me, and thank you for believing in me. I also want to say welcome and thank you to all of my friends and family and colleagues and coworkers who are here today. This is amazing. I want you to know that every time you said good luck and wished me well and asked me about this journey, it mattered. It gave me strength, it allowed me to persevere, and it really served as a beacon because it takes a village to raise a black scholar. Let me tell you, it's not easy. I want to offer my deepest appreciation for my partner in life, my spouse, my lover. You, Mika, are my hero. You have taught me the meaning of unconditional love and sacrifice, and you have believed in me no matter what. And I would not be this far on this journey if not for you. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for the sacrifices you have made to fulfill this vision. So, we are going on a journey into my dissertation, and it is going to definitely represent the scholarly work behind it, but this is really a story, and I'm excited to share this story with you. And this story starts with me. My name is Charles Chip McNeal. I am a black man. I use pronouns he, him, his. I am bald with a beard with some gray in it. Today I am wearing a pale yellow shirt with a beautiful African sash around my shoulders. And as we come to this experience, I want to acknowledge that I reside in North Oakland, California. I want to acknowledge that Oakland sits on the unceded land of the Chichenyo and the Ohlone people. This land is of great importance to the indigenous peoples, and I recognize that our present community has and continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land. I remember and respect the history and presence of indigenous peoples and their enduring relationship to the traditional homelands. I will work towards creating an awareness of the cultural erasure of indigenous peoples and the processes of colonization and subjugation that have contributed to that erasure. By offering this land acknowledgement, I affirm indigenous sovereignty, and I will work to hold our community more accountable to the needs of indigenous peoples. I also want to thank all the elders and ancestors who have come before me, because I stand on your shoulders. The trials and tribulations that you have endured and that our ancestors have endured are the foundation for what I am able to achieve in this moment. I want to thank those who have given their lives to afford me this opportunity to walk this path and pursue my dreams. I want to call upon all those elders who are present to offer your blessing to me in this moment as I share this great work with you. Please bless this experience and guide me and allow me to fulfill my destiny. So I do want to advise everyone, I want to give you a trigger warning. What I'm talking about today are difficult topics, and some of them are painful, and you might find yourself triggered in some way. And I just want you to know that that may happen, and I want you to take care of yourself. And this trigger warning is as much for me as it is for you, because this work comes from the soul, it comes from the spirit. And if you are of the dominant culture, if you walk through the world with privilege, unearned privilege, I want you to take this opportunity to listen deeply, to listen with your heart and with your soul and with your spirit, and see if there's something that even in this moment you might take away. Because those of us who teach, we're always teaching when we're sharing. And so there may be something here for you to see, to listen and learn. And I just want you to take that opportunity to let it sink in and reflect on that. You know, I want everybody to, let's all appreciate the fact that we are here during a turbulent time in the world. We have suffered unprecedented impact because of COVID. We had racial unrest. We've had this incredible sight of seeing a Black man murdered right before our eyes. We have dealt with an insurgence in the Capitol uprising that made us feel like our government was going to crash. And we have lost our art, our culture, and our communities in so many ways, not being able to hug and touch and see each other. We have the war in Ukraine, which goes on today, and my heart goes out to the people of the Ukraine and for all the lives that are lost. And in the midst of this, in the midst of all of this, I had to write a dissertation. It took, imagine what it might take under the best of circumstances. But I had to do it during the pandemic, and it gives a certain preciousness to this experience, knowing that I had to persevere through even these compounded traumas. But I'm here. We're here. It is important that I say that let us acknowledge that this country and our communities are not equitable, nor have they ever been. This pandemic and the growing movement against police brutality and for Black lives continues to bring into sharp focus how what are often considered historic inequities and injustices and disparities are actually present-day realities, especially for Black folks, for Indigenous folks, for immigrants, for disabled folks, for transgender folks, for gender non-conforming, for poor folks, for displaced folks, for refugees. I want us all to remember that oppression is interconnected. And so when I say Black Lives Matter, I'm saying that all of us matter. And that as we solve the injustices for one, we address the injustices for all. Okay, I'm going to bring some context to this circumstance. Let me just bring a little context because I'm often misunderstood. I will say that is the story of my life. I'm often misunderstood because in some way, shape, or form, I'm a little bit ahead of the curve. I keep my ear to the ground and I watch people and I teach and I watch with curiosity and critical awareness. And so many times I'm talking about a subject which has yet come into focus and people look at me and they scratch their heads and they say, what? What is he talking about? What is he teaching about? And anybody who knows me knows this to be true. So 20 years ago, I was talking about culturally and linguistically responsive education. People didn't know what I was talking about. Of course, it's come into focus now. I was promoting social emotional learning in schools, and now we know how that's embedded. I was a proponent of multiculturalism and dance education before it became fashionable and before it became more indigenous to public education. And now, arts integration. I've been talking about arts integration for a long time, and now we understand the way that it impacts teaching and learning. I will tell you that in the year 2019, a full year before the racial unrest of this country, I was talking about the incredible moment that was going to come to us. I didn't know how it would show up, but I knew it would come. And I went to Matthew Shilvach, the general director of San Francisco Opera, and I said, let me tell you what's going to happen in the world. There is nothing more important than us addressing the racial inequities in society. There is nothing more important than racial equity in education, than racial equity in the arts. And somehow he believed me. This was before anything had jumped off. And he believed me. And so a full year before the racial awakening, I began to establish a department, the first ever department of diversity, equity, and community in the opera. And lo and behold, when we did have the travesty that we experienced with George Floyd, we were ready. We were primed. We'd already established our department. We'd already begun the work. So many times I've been ahead of the curve, and again, people look at me and they're like, what is he talking about? But here's what I'll tell you. What my research centers on is what we need to be looking at now and into the future. Love and empathy in education. It has merit. It has an impact. It has a relevance. I'm looking at ecological literacy. Our planet is in a crisis. This planet is dying. Not only must we act immediately and in this moment, we must set our children up to address this in the long term, to preserve this world that we live on, this planet. We must give them the tools they need to preserve our future and the future of generations to come. Transdisciplinarity is a phrase that some don't understand, but it really has to do with the fact that this idea that every subject is separate from one another is an illusion. That's not how the world works. The world is interconnected, interlaced, and so many things are dependent upon others. Afrofuturism is part of the future of education, because that was what would give our children an opportunity to believe in themselves and believe in a future with them in it, where Black people have the same opportunities as anyone else in society. And of course, emancipatory pedagogy, teaching for freedom, teaching for critical consciousness. And I will tell you that healing, as we're now seeing because of the pandemic, is in fact going to be something critically important to education. Now, I'm saying all this because I started all this work 7 years ago, before this all happened, because I saw this coming. I saw the need for this happening in education. This is the way that we need to look at the future of education, through these incredibly important emerging topics. Now, as I look at the problem, we have to first think of this critical issue of academic achievement gap. Black children, brown children, poor children are not achieving in education. Now, there could be some criticism of, well, how are we measuring that achievement? And there's some bias in that, and certainly there is. But at the same time, our children are leaving school without the tools they need to survive and thrive in society. But when we say achievement gap, we're often talking about the fact that we think our children are somehow not doing something. But the truth of the matter is it the children or is it the system? Because if it's the system, then it's not an achievement gap, it's an opportunity gap. And the opportunity is that we're not giving students the opportunities they need to succeed. We're not giving them the tools. We're not giving them the fundamental resources they need to survive and thrive. So, is it an opportunity gap or is it an achievement gap? Either way, too many of our Black and brown children are being left behind. Now, as I start this, I want to give you some definitions so that you are clear about what we're talking about. We're talking about equity in education. Now, the concept of equity in education is a deeply complex problem. It is the pursuit of creating an educational system that caters to and supports all students in their learning and development. This means that no matter what a student's background, language, race, economic profile, gender, learning ability, disability, family history, that every student gets the support and the resources they need to achieve their educational goals. Now, I'm also using the term equity, and more often people are familiar with the word equality, and they're often used interchangeably, but they're somewhat different. Equality is giving everybody the same thing. Everybody gets the same piece of pie. A piece of pie for you, a piece of pie for you, a piece of pie for you. But equity says we don't just give people equal, we give them what they need. You're hungry. I'll give you 2 pieces. You're not so hungry. You get a half a slice. You get just what you need in order to meet your needs. Equity is what we're looking at. Equity in education. Now, why does it matter? Equity in education could improve outcomes for all societal inequities in multiple domains. Education equity is really at the root of addressing racial inequities in our society, because inequities in education have contributed to the structural inequities in society. When Black communities have access to better education, all outcomes improve. A person who is educated, a Black man who is educated, has a better opportunity to advocate for better health care. An educated individual has a better opportunity to negotiate the paperwork and the myriad of hurdles to get housing, adequate housing. When you're educated, you understand politics and the power of the vote. So as we deal and we think about education, it is at the foundation of an improved outcome for Black and brown folks. It's also part of an improved economy, economic prosperity. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Now, there are many problems in education. I do not want to put forth this notion that I am trying to solve all of education's problem in this one dissertation. It's not the one fix, but it is a strategy that will lead us toward that goal. There are many problems. This is a complex issue of the problems in public education, and I'm only dealing with one aspect of it, and that is what is happening in the classroom. What's happening in the classroom? Who benefits from equity in the classroom? Let me see. Let's think about this for a second. If we were to teach students in a way that was loving and supportive and affirming and relevant and culturally mediated and sensitive and filled with love and empathy, who might benefit? Just the Black and brown kids? Or any kid of color? Any kid coming from trauma or from disadvantaged means? How about low-income students, first-generation students, ESL students, neurodivergent students? Or maybe we're really talking about all students. All students. Those students, because those students who get this benefit of being in the supportive learning environment become members of society. John Powell, the head of the Othering and Belonging Institute, the Haas Othering and Belonging Institute, uses a term called targeted universalism. And targeted universalism says, as we address the most disadvantaged in our society, as we heal the most traumatized in our society, everybody benefits. That means that when we look at sidewalks and we have the curb cut in the curb for people with wheelchairs, people with strollers, people with canes, people who have trouble with sight, many people benefit from this one thing that was created for one group of people. Everybody benefits from it. Targeted universalism says that as we heal the most unhealed among us, everybody will be lifted up. Well, if that's so, we have to consider, well, then what is keeping us stuck? Why isn't this problem being solved of academic achievement for Black and brown kids? And I say it is something that I call Cartesian anxiety. The fear of change, the fear of losing power, the fear that, in fact, there is not enough, and in order for us to be equitable in this society, somebody has to lose something. That's a myth and that's a fallacy. Because the truth of the matter is, it's about control and it's about power. And those who have it want to keep it. And the best way to keep it is to make sure that we don't get educated. Okay? So this work is meant to be a disruptor. It's meant to dismantle and disrupt the status quo and to create a pathway of possibilities. And I want to name the fact that, for me, equity is a verb, and it requires action, and it demands change. All right, so central thing. I'm going to put this on the screen for a moment. When I looked at distilling my inquiry question, the question that guides this research, I had many sub-questions. How should teachers be teaching? What should they know? How do we give people the skills they need for the 21st century? What are the components of an emancipatory environment? And that all finally distilled itself into a single question: what would constitute a transformative, emancipatory K-12 pedagogy that teaches for healing and liberation for Black students? And I'll tell you something, when I started this research, the last two words weren't on there. But the research allowed me to see that, in fact, the research I was doing was for and about Black children. Others will benefit, but it's for and about Black children. That's what this research is about. Unapologetically. It's about the thriving possibilities of Black children in education if we address their needs. Now, The question becomes, like, why did you choose that word emancipatory pedagogy? Well, emancipatory has a very particular meaning to me. Now, I did not choose the word liberation, although that's important. But if you think about it, I think about Abraham Lincoln, right? Emancipation Proclamation. They didn't call it the Liberation Proclamation. The reason they didn't call it the Liberation Proclamation is because liberation is about freedom. It's about freeing from constraints. But emancipation is to endow with rights, to give agency, to empower, and to see them as an equal. To emancipate is beyond just freedom. It is a humanization. And so I chose the word emancipate because to emancipate is to give hope and to imbue with the rights that everyone should have. Now, when I think of emancipatory pedagogy, it is both a theory, a way of thinking, a concept, but it's also a practice because it has to do with how you teach and what you teach and where you're teaching from in your heart. So it is both a theory and a practice. Now, my methodology. So when you're doing research, right, you got to have like, how are you going to do it, Chip? You're going to read the literature. But really, what methodology are you using? And the methodology I chose is something called grounded theory. Grounded theory involves the collection and analysis of data. The theory is grounded in the data. And that means you are looking to the data to inform what you're thinking. You may start with a certain premise, but the truth is the data actually informs what you're thinking. So I may have said, oh, I think I have 4 or 5 components that are important to an emancipatory learning environment. But as I do the research, I find that there are more or different ones than I expected. So in this way, grounded theory represents a simultaneous involvement of data collection, data analysis, and it's a way of forming new thoughts. In fact, categorizing and organizing information in new and different ways. So at its essence, grounded theory is a pathway to generating new theory. And in this case, the theory that I generated is emancipatory pedagogy. Now, when you're looking at data, you also have to have a lens. You have to have a way of looking at the data. What premise are you going to use to organize the way that you're looking? And I found the premise of Paulo Freire. Paulo Freire, an amazing activist and educator who really is thought of as one of the founders of critical pedagogy. Critical pedagogy is a way of looking at content and looking for and noticing and naming injustices and inequity. It's saying that you have a critical understanding, a critical awareness of what's going on. For Paulo Freire, looking to teach students is to teach them to think critically and to become critically aware of their circumstances and the oppression they're experiencing, to name it, to try to subvert it, and to collectively work to change it. And so that is a premise that became both the lens through which I looked at the work, but it's also a foundational element of emancipatory pedagogy itself. Critical pedagogy. Then there is a sociocultural learning theory. And this theory is exactly what it sounds like. It basically says that we do not learn in isolation from other people. We learn with other people. That the idea that in a classroom, the way you talk, the discourse, the conversations, the way that you notice somebody else learn something, you learn from each other, and information is grown and advances because you're in dialogue. And this really puts forth this notion that, in fact, we have to pay attention to the community, you see. Social cultural learning theory says that in the classroom, we need to pay attention to the learning community. And then finally, there's this other lens is transdisciplinarity. And that means I knew that I would be limited if I looked at each thing, each element of this in isolation from one another. Because in fact, we know that, again, as I said before, the world is interconnected in a myriad of ways. And that if we look at it through a transdisciplinary lens, we can see the interconnections, we can see understandings that are above and beyond each of the discrete elements. Transdisciplinarity gives us a purview to see and notice things that we might not have noticed before. But it's important to name the relationship because these things are not isolated concepts. So then, as I frame the problem, so now I'm approaching the research, and I'm reading the material, and you can see the frame is off. The frame is off because it's difficult to frame the problem of education being so complex, so many different issues, so many different problems, so many different disparities. We have retention disparities. That means that Black children are held back more frequently than any other children. We have talent disparities where Black children have the least access to the most advanced and creative and gifted classes. And we have educator equity, where in fact Black and brown schools get teachers who are often first and second year who are the least advanced. These are just some of the disparities we look at. But as I looked at the problem, before I could begin to address the solution, I had to look deeply at this issue. And what this issue and what really came about is this incredible thing that I looked at that lasted not 10 years or 20, 40, 60 years or more. We're looking at the same, when I looked at the data, it's the same data across 60 years. The same achievement gap between Black and white children has existed over half a century. Really? And nobody can solve this problem? So it's either lack of will, lack of know-how, or something else. And that's what I was looking for. Maybe it's something that is embedded in the structure. Because how is it possible that the issue of academic achievement disparity for Black students has persisted over time, across generations, across states, across every grade level, across every type of school? How is that possible? There's something systemic at play here. So I wanted to get to the root of it. And I looked deeply. And unfortunately, the data I found was not very encouraging. We have Black students who drop out at twice the rate of white students. We have Black students who don't graduate from high school. 50% of Black students don't graduate from high school versus 75% of white students. We have the fact that our children of color are experiencing all kinds of trauma, not only the racial trauma that goes on in everyday life, but the fact that they live in neighborhoods sometimes that are also augmenting that trauma. Do you know a Black girl is twice as likely to be raped in high school as a white girl? This is devastating, but this is all part of the compounded trauma that our students must attend to. It's hard to say these things. It's hard to name these things, but we've got to tell the truth in order to address the problem. And then we get to the fact that we know there's economic disparities. That means Black and brown children and poor children don't have the nutrition they need to be learning ready. We don't have fresh food markets and food courts in Black neighborhoods. For the longest time in Oakland, you couldn't get a Safeway in a Black neighborhood. But that's not one of the worst is this unequal discipline. Unequal discipline. And what that means is that Black kids, Black boys, are sent out of the classroom disproportionately to every other group. And when you're sent out of the classroom, you're not in the classroom, which means you're not learning, which means you fall behind, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that you stay behind, and the outcome is what we already know. So let me tell you a quick story. This student talks when he's not supposed to. Talks when he's not supposed to. Won't remain in his seat more than like 15 minutes. He talks back to his teacher. In fact, he asks so many questions that the teacher has to put him on a limit. You only get 3 questions a day. You ask too many questions and you ask him at the wrong time. He's distracting other students. He makes what's called disrespectful facial expressions to his teacher. He's sent to the principal's office. Not once, but twice, maybe sometimes twice a week. And this becomes a regular occurrence. He's, of course, missing learning in the classroom, and he starts to fall behind. His schoolwork suffers, and he tries to hide it. And the parents are never engaged. They're never really told what's going on. But this troubled child is in the situation where he is labeled incorrigible. In some ways, some people are saying he's unteachable. He appears to be a slow reader, but is that because he wasn't in the classroom or because he has a reading problem? We don't know. Maybe he has a learning disability. Maybe he has some other disorder. Maybe he has ADHD. Yeah, maybe he has ADHD. Or is he just a problem child? Anyway, his academic prospects are not bright, according to the experts. I forgot one part of this story. This child is in pre-kindergarten and he's 5 years old. Okay. In spite of this pathologized assessment, the student persists in school through sheer determination. In some way, through high school, he begins to develop a clinical depression, which lasts for parts of his life, self-esteem issues, social anxiety disorder. Later in life, as an adult, he finds out that in fact he has a kind of dyslexia. It's a milder form, but it's a dyslexia. But it also turns out that this child is what we call a kinesthetic learner. Moves through learning to move and move to learn. Sitting still is a challenge, but moving makes learning easier. But he beats the odds. And somehow he gets through high school, graduates with fairly acceptable grades, gets into college, drops out. And then he has a challenge. Now remember, there are no trust funds, and there's no scholarships, and there's no parents to borrow money from. But somehow, this little traumatized boy, makes it through. And after he becomes an adult, it takes him 15 years to get his college degree. 15 years of study, of work. Because this turns out this young man was a working teaching artist. He was a dancer and an artist. Now, the funny part of this story is he worked so hard with his nose to the grindstone, so long, so hard, that actually when it came push to shove, when he was going to get the recognition for the degree he'd finally earned after 15 years, turned out they said, you know what? You actually didn't just earn one degree, you earned two. Because you wasn't paying attention and you worked so hard, you actually get 2 degrees. Now, in case you haven't figured it out yet, that little boy was me. That little boy was me, who survived in spite of the odds. This is a true story. But the saddest part about it is that when I did this research, what was true then is true now. And today, Black students in pre-kindergarten are suspended and expelled from school at 3 to 4 times that of their white counterparts, even though white students exhibit some of the same behaviors. I think we call that anti-Black racism. I think we call that systemic injustice. Because there is a biased implementation of disciplinary policies. There's a discriminatory discipline practices. There's racialized school climates. We have teachers in schools who are under-resourced, and we have teachers who are not fully trained to deal with the complexities of the learning environment. The negative perception of people with Black skin in this country has shaped an ongoing narrative and contributed to a life experience that is drastically different from that of our white counterparts. For a young Black man like myself, this implicit and sometimes overt bias can result in damaging and long-lasting effects because of white supremacy. They traumatize students, diminish their self-esteem, and this impact, of course, can last a lifetime. So I want everyone to understand, as I tell this story then, that this is not just a research that is sitting in an academic space. This is a personal story. This is a human story. So as we look at this data and we look at what I'm talking about, let's remember there's a human being behind it. And let's remember that I only represent me, but in fact, there are tens of thousands of Black boys who experience the same thing. This research is personal. Black men and Black boys are dying because of racial oppression. I was a poor Black child in Oakland, and I could have easily been another statistic. I suffered at the hands of reductive educational practices that tried their best to convince me that I was not smart enough, not good enough, not strong enough, not worthy enough, and that my dreams were absurd. Unintentional or not, I was told I was not good enough, and everything in my learning experience reinforced that. But I did not believe them. And part of the reason I didn't believe them is because there were singular people in my life, magical people, who told me that the truth was different than what the world was telling me. I found hope and I found purpose and I found possibilities in the eyes of those who believed in me. And I took advantage of it. And I've worked my entire life to pave the way so that other Black students do not have to experience the same trauma, pain, and tribulations that I experience. This is my calling. Because I will tell you, I am made of stardust. And you are made of stardust. And every Black child out there who does not yet understand or see the beauty in themselves is made of that same stardust. So, when push comes to shove, I am this dissertation. I am the living embodiment of all that I teach and research. I am the question. I am the answers. I am the hope for a better world. I am listen, if a life's practice could be a dissertation, then I'm made. I am already that. Because I am my own creative project. Because I have survived and I have thrived in a world that told me it wasn't possible. Today, I am at the final door, this academic doorway that filters my life into this narrow space that says if you cross this threshold, then you are considered a thinker of significance. And that is the hurdle I strive for now. I didn't do this for anyone but me and the children who will come after me. Let me tell you, if you don't understand it, the prison to pipeline, the prison to pipeline is alive and well. We spend more money on prisons than we spend on schools. Simple as that. Here, I'll give you this one. This is even better. Let me tell you something. And people know these statistics, but I want you to know it and take it to your heart. You can pay $12,000 and send a Black student to Cal State East Bay, or you can pay $65,000 and send them to San Quentin. $53,000 difference. Listen, you could give housing, food, schooling, counseling, anything a kid needs for $53,000. But somehow, this society says, what does it serve? That prison is a better option for too many Black men. This is the part I want to drive home here. Economics. People who want to talk about, let's talk about economics. Gross domestic product. A gross domestic product represents like the monetary measure of all the goods and services of a country, right? So do you understand that actually the academic achievement of Black students is actually a drain on our economy? And in fact, if we were to improve that, our economy would improve by $500 million. And if we were to solve poverty, the combination of solving some of the most poverty-stricken parts of our community, as well as improving academic achievement, would improve the gross domestic product by $1 trillion. What I'm trying to say is that it would benefit our society to teach our children to read. That's what I want you to take away. It would actually improve our economy and our society. I want to thank Dr. Rupa Marya from UCSF for this slide. This slide has the two black boxes I added. And what you basically see is the fact that you've got colonialism. You've got colonialism that gave birth to both capitalism and white supremacy. White supremacy, of course, supremacism gave birth to white supremacy, male supremacy, human supremacy, which is what's destroying our planet, this ecocide, exploitation of resources, exploitation of labor forces. Oh, we need people in prison because they're part of the labor force that is unpaid. But in the end, the two things that people of color experience in the end, three things, I should say, the black people experience are either trauma, disease, or death. Because our lives are shorter because of the trauma we experience. This is the data. What is the driver of this white supremacy culture? It's education. Keeping poor people, black people, indigenous people ignorant and uneducated is going to sustain white supremacy culture. It is the driver. And if it is the driver, if education is the driver of white supremacism, then it must also be the place where we can interrupt it. If it is a driver, then that must be where we can interrupt it. Here's what I want to say. If you do not understand that racism is a public, anti-black racism is a public health crisis. And what I'm doing in this research is trying to save lives and address a deep systemic inequity. Because I was just one child. Imagine how many other black boys there are out there who don't have the same benefits I had. The perseverance, the opportunity. So this research acknowledges that anti-black racism is a human rights and a health crisis. And as I address through this research, the idea to repurpose education, dismantle colonialism and oppression in education, to restore and renew elements to what the teaching and learning paradigm can be, and in the end, to save a life. Save a life. Okay. So I did this work. I did all this research, found this problem deep, rigorous, painful. But the truth matter is, I wanted to put, what's the answer? What do we do? We got to put it together in a conceptual framework, a new way of thinking so that we can bring some healing to the world. Now,
it's about 40 minutes.
Thank you so much. I'm almost at the end. Okay, so what matters? Facts don't matter. Here are some jobs that didn't exist 15 years ago. Digital marketing, blogger, app designer. These didn't exist 10 years ago. So if these jobs didn't exist 10 years ago, then that means we're teaching children for a future we can't predict. You understand? We're teaching children for a future we can't predict. So that means they don't need facts. You can Google anything. Facts don't matter. You can Google anything. What matters are certain qualities and dispositions. These are what matter. Critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, being able to get along with people, work with people who are not like you, communicate effectively across and between cultures, to bring mindfulness and thoughtfulness to your work, to have global knowledge about what it means to be in the world and how our economies and our worlds are interconnected. Social emotional intelligence, multiliteracy, understanding that we need cultural literacy, social literacy. So I looked at over 1,200 resources. Anybody who does academic research will know that's crazy. I read 1,200 sources of information. I used about 800 of them. When I wrote the dissertation, it was 750 pages. I cut it down to 350 so Michael wouldn't kill me. Michael said, don't hand me a 750-page paper. So I had to cut it down. Thank you, Michael, for making me distill my information. But I looked for a smoking gun. And guess what? I found one. I wanted to find out where the institutionalization of oppression was. And I found it in this very, very simple document. 1918. The cardinal principles of secondary education said, we're going to create high school. But guess what? Black people, poor people, and indigenous people don't really need to go to high school. So let's just make high school as white and Eurocentric as we want to, because only white men will go. 1918, people. Now, let's see. What does that sound like? Does that sound like high school today? Yes. This is where it was embedded in the structure of public education, and it hasn't changed since 1918. So if I found that in 1918, I had to figure out what was going on today. What else mattered? and I looked at neuroscience and brain research, studied brain research for 5 years. I don't know anything about brains, but I studied it. And I found this out. This is what I found out. Found out that, in fact, motivation is the most important part of academic achievement. That kids have to want to learn stuff that matters. That they need positive relationships because they can't learn from someone they don't like or don't trust. And that when you embed culture in education, children thrive because they feel validated, they feel seen, and they feel incorporated. But something was missing from this paradigm. Something still was missing that I couldn't figure it out. Something wanted to be known that I couldn't figure out what it was. And I said to myself, what is missing? Love. Love. That's what's missing. Love is what is underneath compassion, empathy, forgiveness. We have forgotten the role of love in education. And so I looked to my sister, Bell Hooks. We lost Bell Hooks this year. But Bell Hooks became the philosophical foundation for this work. The philosophical foundation. She taught two things. Bell Hooks. Transgression, to question the system, and love. And she said, love is what allowed us to triumph over slavery. Love allows us to survive the impossible. Love is what binds people of color together. And that where there is love, there can be justice, and where there is justice, there can be healing, and this can be done in the classroom. So I fashioned 4 pillars. I carried all these topics, everything I've discussed today. I took all these topics and I put them into 4 categories. And those 4 categories became culture, identity and relationship, the second, creativity, and healing. And this manifested in this framework. This little document is the sum of all my research. I like the fact that it isn't boastful. It isn't flashy. It is simply the truth of my understanding of the world. And emancipatory pedagogy has 4 pillars. And those 4 pillars I just identified are where you can put any of the cultural or healing pedagogies that help to both support learning for Black and brown students and bring healing. It is about culture and it's about healing. And this became the pinnacle of my research. This little table. It's funny, you do 7 years worth of research and it comes out a little box just like that. Well, I went a little bit further and I also organized it according to whether you're teaching, whether you're thinking of it as pedagogy, whether you're thinking of it as a way of teaching, or whether you're thinking of it as what you teach, curriculum. And so those 3 categories was another way of framing those same elements that are healing and cultural pedagogies. And then, just for good measure, I actually put it in one more framework, and that is if you were to look at the stages of consciousness from Freire, from I'm noticing to I'm subverting till I am actively working against oppression in society. I organized it that way. Now, here you go. You say, Chip, how does this all come down? What does it mean in the end? And here it goes. So what I noticed after years and years of teaching in the practical application of it is that a teacher would say, I'm going to take one of these cultural or healing pedagogies and I'm going to change my classroom. But nothing really changed. It kind of stays the same. So then the teacher might even say, well, let's try a new strategy. We'll take 2 different elements of healing and cultural pedagogies, and I might have an improved environment. But what I propose is that if you look at this table that I created, there are different categories that complement and positively reinforce one another. They are mutually reinforcing concepts that amplify each other. So when you take 3 or more cultural or healing pedagogies and put them together, then you have what constitutes an emancipatory learning environment. Now, the choices you make of the 3 things you choose has to do with the makeup of your class, the disposition of the teacher, and the needs of the students. And that has to be done through thorough, careful examination. But my premise is simply that if you take 3 or more pedagogies from different categories, they become mutually reinforcing, become more than the sum of their parts, and create a healing environment where all students can thrive. And there you have the opportunity for transformation. And when you have transformation, you have Black students who no longer see themselves as the pathologized victims of a reductive education. They then can begin to celebrate their own Blackness and the Black history, the history that's untold in so many ways. They get to envision a future where they are in it, and so they don't make horrible choices that shorten their lives or that diminish them. And they begin to see themselves in a way that says, I need to live because there is a future for me, and I can claim Black joy. And that little boy, any little boy, can say, my life matters. My life matters. And that little boy can grow up to be the man he was meant to be. Let me say this, in case you haven't understood this, embedded in critical and healing pedagogies is creativity. Creativity is not optional. It's a human issue. It's a human rights issue. Because you cannot compete in the world that is emerging in a creative capacity if you don't have the tools to be a divergent, innovative, creative thinker. Creativity is not an option. It is a human rights issue. I'll leave you with two things. Talk about implementation. This is a concept. Remember, this is a conceptual framework. It's mainly about how you think about education, and then, of course, you develop curriculum that supports it. But I'm going to give you two things that schools can do, that we can do right now, right this minute, tomorrow, to change the world. Hire Black teachers. Hire Black teachers. Schools and school leaders, hire Black teachers. When you hire Black teachers, Black students do better. All students do better, in fact. And remember, I talked about that suspension and dismissal from class. It's cut in half when you have a Black instructor. And I will tell this to any educator, that in fact, you can ask critical questions of yourself and your work. That all those things I put together, where you might look at them as being, a host of healing and critical pedagogies, but if you ask critical questions of yourself in your classroom, you're actually invoking that work in ways that you may not even know. And so this is a set of 16 critical reflection questions that the culturally competent educator could ask. You can use this tomorrow. And you interrogate your work. You say, what am I doing? How am I teaching? Who am I supporting? What am I missing? You ask these critical questions, and you can bring healing into this space. And this is all meant to be something that I believe we can take to higher education, take to teacher preparation programs all around the Bay Area, all around this country. And we can better prepare teachers to have these tools and these strategies in their back pocket so they can create an emancipatory learning environment, one where all students will thrive. An emancipatory pedagogy becomes not only our present, but it becomes our future. I'm going to finish with this. The great fabled tribe, the Maasai of East Africa, have a saying, and it's called Kasirian Injira. Kasirian Injira. And that means, how are the children? And when they walk into a village and someone gives you this greeting, Kasirian Injira, the response is, you have to think, is well, if our village is well, if we have food, if our children are fed, if they're happy, then our village is well. If our children are well, our village is well. And so the response is, the children are well. Now, in this country, if someone were to ask us, Kasirian Injira, what would we say? My hope is that one day we can say, the children are well. All the children are well. And so is our society. Thank you.
Thank you, Chip. It was just, so much to say. First of all, just starting off with your powerful story, and really just, putting it out there to think about when you were a child, probably around the same time as I was, and juxtaposing that with today, and how little has changed for, unfortunately, for that 5-year-old boy. So, I mean, I just think that speaks to the relevance and importance of your work. And so what I'd like to do is maybe invite your committee members to comment on your work, and then we'll have a series of questions. We can just sort of maybe we can just sort of rotate, and we might ask a few questions each, and then to the extent there's time permitting, then we can maybe have some questions from other people in the audience. So, are you ready, Chip? Okay. So, Leslie, would you like to start?
There is so much passion, so much focus, so much love for the work that you have engaged in this entire process. I am impressed with the breadth of this undertaking and the attention to the theoretical and the practical nature of the work that you've done here. And I admire your dedication. I admire the warmth and the compassion that you bring to making a true difference. So for me, there's very much a difference between, talking the talk and walking the talk. And what I love is that you have the vision to bring that, to bring both, not just one, not just talking about it from a theoretical or conceptual, but to really think through what this might look like and to bring your heart into this. And so for me, I just want to just thank you for the love that you represent and your fearlessness and in your awareness to bring love, to call into this space. To me, that is so profound and so important, and so much, I resonate so much with that in terms of the work that I do. So I just, I stand with you, and I appreciate just you can feel that love and that passion is so important. So yes, we're here to talk about things from a theoretical and an academic and scholarly perspective, but I love it. It means nothing to me without what you are speaking to, which is this compassion and this love and this attention to truth. So thank you. Andrew?
Yeah, you're such an amazing storyteller, very gifted. I have not been to a dissertation defense quite like this, and I think that's for good reason. It speaks to everything you talked about, right? That there are these systems in place that are not meant for us. They're not meant for us to exist there, let alone to thrive there. And your work is about how do we create these spaces where young folk, particularly Black folk, can, thrive. And so I think it's more than a dissertation. It's a beautiful testimony. It's a living testimony. It is a sacred gift, and you are calling on those generations. Like you talked about the future. However, the other important part is that you recall a past where we have been working on these things for so long. And this is tied to, I don't know if we just want to make a sort of initial comments, but it is tied to probably some of the questions that are my really only questions here, because it is, I'll agree, such a thorough, comprehensive, as I was looking through and also listening and just thinking about the terrain that you cut. You didn't leave anything out, really. I don't think at all. It's a real history of anyone who wants to know about sort of educational history in the US, but I also really appreciate the global connections, right, that you're able to make and those histories. And just as I would maybe find myself wondering something like, oh, I want to hear more from these white American educators, you turn and then talk about those, and you even ended there, really, right, in terms of thinking about these histories. And so I think that that's really important. So if it's okay, I would like to go ahead and ask, this question. And so one of the things I found myself thinking, not only reading the dissertation, but also with the presentation today, it is very beautiful. And I think a lot of what I'm hearing too, and I wonder what your thoughts are about this, but that your work speaks to a kind of thing of cultural competency, right? How do we really truly change this system that, like I was saying, and like your work speaks to, it's not made for certain folks and certain bodies. I found myself wondering, how do you deal with the structural components, right? Because we can continue to sort of bring in reform or additive measures into classroom spaces. It seems to me that the biggest impediment is actually the structure of the institution of education itself, that it needs to be crushed and reimagined completely. And where I actually found that you spoke to this the most clearly, or found myself wanting to hear more about. I love the kindness curriculum examples that you speak about. And in particular, though, I guess it's two-part. If you could speak a little bit more to, where did I write it? Oh, eco-literacy. I thought when your section where you start to talk about connections to land is where you're actually really interrupting education as we have seen it in this country, because it's been everything but connected to the things around, to an ecosystem, right? And so I think that's where there can be the space for that structural change. And then with that, how might you think, so when you think about implementation, right, of the pillars, what might that look like, right, for teachers and school districts? Because if that's where we want to see this happening, they're so resistant, right? I mean, I'm personally battling with these folks right now because we're trying to implement an ethnic studies requirement for the University of California, and a lot of pushback, right? Because if it doesn't fit with the model that exists, people will always say you're not doing consistently what this other discipline is doing or what these folks are doing. And so again, I think I would love to hear about sort of your thoughts on the structural components that need to be addressed, and how your work kind of attends to those, and in particular how your theorization of like an eco-literacy speaks to those issues. Thanks.
Thank you for those questions, Andrew. You are very on point when you talked about cultural intelligence. I use the term cultural literacy or cultural intelligence because it is not about being masterful about another person's culture or some culture other than your own. It is about developing capacity for your own cultural humility. Saying that the way I see the world, the way I experience and walk through the world, is not how everyone sees and walks through the world. And the ability to take to conceive of another perspective, another way of looking at the problem, another way of understanding what learners may be experiencing, to step outside yourself and to say what might they be perceiving from where they sit. That ability to put yourself in another's shoes is the essence of cultural humility. And cultural intelligence says that I don't know everything about your culture, but I realize and understand that there are cultural ways that I can become more sensitive and more responsive in so far as I can learn, I can grow, I can accept, and I can incorporate the cultural knowledge that you have, that you share with me, and that I learn from you into my own makeup, thereby changing and transforming my own outlook, my own worldview. So cultural intelligence is a way of shifting one's thinking when you bring that enough humility, and that you're able to step outside this sense of ethnocentrism, where there's only one way of looking and understanding the world. Ecoliteracy. It's interesting because it's actually defined in my dissertation as actually a through line. And that wasn't so when I began. I was just looking at academic achievement. Why would ecoliteracy be the through line? And what the data told me, what my research reflected to me, was that this idea that the that we have forgotten, because of Descartes, because of the 17th century philosopher, we have forgotten our connection to each other and to this planet and to all that is reality. And that the integral nature of things says that the health of one part of this giant system is the health of the other part. And the degradation of one part is the degradation of the whole. And so that when I think about Black folks and brown folks and poor folks, and we think about the way that they think of themselves and their disconnection from this planet, that is part of the restoration. That is part of the healing. That is part of the reconnection. To know that not only must I take care of myself and my family and my community, but that this planet and our society and our environment is an integral part of that. And that we are all interconnected. And that to understand the way to take care of the world is a way to understand how to take care of self. So that is what is meant behind this idea of ecological literacy. And of course, as I said before, we're in a crisis. We're in a crisis that means for the rest of eternity, we will need to care for this planet in a way that we haven't through the industrial age and through the technological age. So we must teach our children, we must give them the tools they need to do what we didn't. And lastly, yes, there is an intractable nature of education, change. It's utterly resistant. Having worked in this field for as long as I have, it is utterly resistant. At the same time, some people criticize my work in some ways because they say, Chip, you're putting all the emphasis on the teacher. No, that's what this research is focused on. It doesn't take into account that school structure is wrong, that the way we create grades are strong, the way we organize and batch children according to ages. Like, 2 8-year-olds have nothing in common but the fact they were born in the same year and they belong in the same class. Makes no sense. So you're right, the whole system needs to be dismantled and reconstituted. But the implementation happens, I say this about the world. This is what I know about diversity, equity, community, and engagement. That you can go into a place and you can change a policy, you can change a rule, you can change a law, but that won't change the reality of the relationship between people. And change happens not on this policy level and this global level. It happens in this tiny instant where a heart and a mind is engaged and transformed, and a teacher teaches from a place of love, knowing and realizing and addressing their biases, and knowing that the hope that they give is the hope that, in fact, gives these children a sense of what the future can be. So that's why my work centers on teacher education. All this work focuses on the way we train teachers to teach in this new age.
Can I say one thing to follow up if you were done on that, if you don't mind, Michael? No, I love that, because I also love the way that you ended by saying more Black teachers. Because one of the things that strikes me, right, is Bell Hooks, it's actually a critique that I have of All About Love, where she says, and people probably recognize this quote, it's a small little thing, but I think language matters, where she says, when we just go to strangers, when we show them kindness, love, a smile, it's always a place, we always have a place where we can return to love, right? And she says, but we begin that place with strangers. I disagree with her, right? I think part of the problem is that we've spent so much time particularly for folks of color and Black folks, that actually in your work speaks to this, is self-love, right? And that in thinking about things like radical love, for example, actually those vulnerabilities are best shared, like you were just giving the example of the second grader, right? What do they have and truly have in common? And so I think really that love and returning to a place where we can find love has to start with when you look in a mirror, and everywhere out in the world where you go, it's nice. We give so much, right, in terms of thinking about strangers and other people, which it's a beautiful, lovely concept. And I think it negates that your healing has to begin from, I think, a place of where the trauma is first happened, right? And only people who've gone through or have that shared history can really kind of speak to it. So anyway, I just want to comment on that because I think your work in talking about centering, and there's a huge need, and we know that there's educational differences when it's more Black teachers or just teachers of color, period, from teacher ed programs. We just need more of it. And I think that in terms of the implementation piece, California Department of Education should hire you to, implement this for all the teacher training programs in these districts, because that's, I think, the implementation we need to see happening.
Thank you. I'll just say that self-love, Audre Lorde, of course, right? You know the quote. Everybody knows the quote. Audre Lorde says that our self-care is an act of defiance. It's an act it's an act of resistance, and that this notion, this is something I've struggled with during the entire pandemic while I was writing this work, is what does self-love mean, and how do we plant that seed? How do we nurture that within others? And we first have to nurture it within ourselves, all the purveyors, right, of the educational experience. That's why I said the teacher only can teach who you are. You can't teach empathy if you have none. You can't teach compassion if you haven't cultivated it. And you can't teach hope to a Black child unless you believe in them. And then, of course, they have to believe in themselves.
So, Chip, I think some of my questions were similar to Andrew's, because I was thinking about, how to interrupt those structures and systems that have created and continue to create oppression and this ongoing achievement gap. And at the same time, I really underlined the hire Black teachers, is what you said. And then I sort of thought, in my own work at Antioch University, we have a school of education. And that's something that, and this is just more of a statement than a question, but even just this year, we're trying we are offering more scholarships and really trying to get Black teachers to recruit them into teacher education programs. And so, but it's not just the cost. I think a curriculum that includes some of the work that you are doing would be something that really attracts people in a way that is very cutting edge, very relevant. So I'm excited about that. So I'm hoping that we can get you to at some point come talk to our teacher educators at Antioch. So that's just putting in a request for that at some point. But one other thing that and this is a question, one other thing that we've run into recently is we have one of our campuses is in New Hampshire. And it's probably not common knowledge out here about what's happening in New Hampshire, but it might as well be Florida. Like the commissioner of public education there, who, by the way, never sent his kids to public school, they were homeschooled, had just basically attacked all teachers as not portraying the values of the parents because they have posters up in their room about rainbow flags or just definitions of what socialism is, just bringing up the issue of race. And that is now a law in New Hampshire that parents can complain if race is brought up in a way that makes students uncomfortable or makes the parents feel uncomfortable about what was said in the classroom. So I think I'm just wondering, in that context, I know you've been probably following this in multiple places, but I'm just wondering what have you been thinking about that in relationship to your own work, and then how to get teachers to actually feel safe to do this kind of work?
Two things. I want to first respond to the first statement you made about Black teachers. You know, it's no easy task, and it's not a matter of just having a program saying, you know, we want more Black teachers. You've got to create a pathway. You've got to create the conditions, because, and it's more than economics. It is a part of economical, but it's more than that, because what you get is the fact that there are all kinds of sociocultural limitations on those who try to pursue this place as being a Black educator. Not the least of which is the oppressive conditions within higher education. The fact that still the curriculum is all too white, all too Western, and that there are oppressive practices and concepts that continually make being a Black scholar a challenge like no other. And until and unless we understand that we need to change, not only create the conditions for Black teachers to become educators, but to address the higher education context in which Black students have to work twice as hard and teach their professors about what they're missing. And until we change that, you know, our Black students won't thrive. And so I just want to name the fact that some of this work obviously is focused on K-12, but the conditions we're talking about really apply at any grade level. That's what you're really noticing, right? When we talk about the capacities to create a conditions where all learners are welcome and supported and seen and incorporated, that supersedes any grade level. So I am going to say this, and I know it's going to be maybe a little bit. It'll sound a little harsh, but you know, I expected this sort of this feedback, right? Critical pedagogy, the response to critical pedagogy, the response to addressing anti-Black racism, the response to bringing culture into the classroom. I expected this kind of response, this kind of pushback, and I want to sort of just put this in a context. You know how when you're about to put a 4-year-old to bed, a 3-year-old to bed, and they kick and they scream. And they just fight you. They fight you. I don't want to go to bed. I'm not sleepy. And you're like, yes, you are. You're going to bed. That's what it feels like. And yes, I do mean to infantilize them. So I'm doing that on purpose because that's what they're doing. They're pushing back. They're like death throes. They're pushing back against change. They're pushing back against progress. They're pushing back against love. They're pushing back against equality and equity in our society. And they're because they fear something will be lost in their power, their position. And that is what I expected. And yet, the truth will name itself. The truth will know. The truth will out. The truth will out itself. And so, here's what I know. You know, they might talk, if you say the word race in the classroom, yeah, they're going to fight back. But what happens if you say the word love, compassion, community? This is the same beloved. When I talk about love, I'm not talking about romantic love, of course. I'm talking about the beloved community that Martin Luther King thought of when he said beloved community. One in which we acknowledge our differences. We know that some differences will arise, but we negotiate them with love and compassion and forgiveness. And so you can teach through the beloved community, and how can anyone resist that? So I'm just saying there's a pathway to get there, and sometimes you don't take the direct route of teaching about race. Sometimes you take a circuitous path and you get to love. Because this reminds me of one other thing, Michael, and that is, guess what? Teaching about oppression, black and brown and poor children don't need to know about oppression. That's all for white children. We know it. We live it. We don't. That's not for us. So the fact that the white folks are pushing against it is a funny thing. It's like, this was all for you in the first place. But guess what? You can fight us, but you go into bed. Did that answer your question?
Yes, you did.
I got lost in it.
And I love just reading what Lois just wrote about. So there's going to be all that pushback, and then we need a massive support for the change agents. People can't do this alone. So that's really important to me, because what I see is, probably myself included, when I was a third grade teacher and left after 5 years, is I try to do everything differently than what I was supposed to do. But there was, and I know a lot of teachers go in very well intentioned, and then they leave the classroom very quickly because I think you do feel alone and you feel like you're really trying to buck the system by yourself. So I think that I don't have an answer for that, but I think that that's something that to make your framework work and accessible, there has to be some connection between people trying to do this kind of work. And
That's right.
Looks like I don't know what.
Yeah, you're right. We need a critical mass of people addressing educational reform from multiple vantage points, right?
Absolutely.
That's what you're really saying. And that's what I agree with. Absolutely.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, Leslie, do you have a question?
So, so first of all, I just want to thank Michael and Andrew for their questions, because it really did inform and build upon it. I was thinking very much in the same way. So what's so endearing about the work that you're doing, which resonates a lot with me in terms of a lot of the research and scholarship of mine, is this balance between the individual and the collective. The self, you can't have the self-love without, and so that's just one thing I just want to point that out, that I really love about your work, that engages that. And it speaks to that holistic transdisciplinary aspect that you really point to a lot in your work. So having said that, you have this conceptual framework, which has these 4 pillars based upon these 3 strands, which really have a depth of information around pedagogy. And you even you speak of Afrocentrism and even ecofeminism as a need in response to white Eurocentric patriarchy's degradation of women and the environment. And these as a means to kind of empower and reclaim Black voices, to cultivate even mentioned in your dissertation, kind of a retelling of the story of the American chattel slavery system from a more empowered view. So I'm loving that you're bringing kind of these perspectives in. So some of this is building on what was already said before, but it is interesting in terms of how to integrate these elements in a way in which we're in a space right here and now, where there's a critique of critical race theory. I mean, even up to last night with this drafting from the Constitution against Roe versus Wade, and just kind of what the implications of all these mean. And then here you are laying out this wonderful and rich framework. So there was a point when you were talking about your framework where you said, here's this framework. And that the individual, the teacher, for instance, would have to do some type of analysis, so to speak, to kind of choose, okay, I have these wonderful pieces of the puzzle. How could I draw upon 3 or 4 to kind of inform my work in the classroom? So I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about what this analysis of this individual would look like, considering also that we're living in a state where people really are afraid to kind of, there's so much critique going on of this. So, and there is kind of this individual thing that's taking place in the context of this collective, right? You talk about awakening, but there's also kind of an unraveling, I think, that I'm seeing. It's this unraveling that's happening before us. And so I'm just wondering what your thoughts are, I guess, specifically in terms of what I just said about this analysis of a teacher standing in the middle of all of this with your framework. Kind of what would that look like for them to begin to analyze this and talk about how they would bring this into the classroom? And I know that sneaks a little bit into the curriculum piece, that you're there's a warning sign that says this is not, I'm not developing a curriculum.
Yes.
But I am interested in hearing where your thoughts are about where a teacher would begin in this analysis for themselves, as well as they're looking at this cadre of pedagogical understandings that you're bringing as tools for them.
Great.
I know that was a lot, but
no, it's a brilliant set of questions. Just to respond to it, yes, you're absolutely right about the sense that in this work, I look at what is the individual and what is the collective. But we know that social change in the world has happened through collective action, through collaboration. An individual might become a beacon of hope or a leader, but in fact it is the people, a critical mass of people, who create the social change we want in the world. And so, insofar as teaching students to think and have individual agency, but to know how to work effectively, critically, and collaboratively, is what will create the long-term sustainable change that I'm talking about. Secondly, you thank you so much for noticing something very subtle, and I think I'm not sure it came across in this presentation because I spent so much time making sure that people understood the severity and the pervasiveness of the problem of inequity in education. But if you read the dissertation, it is really hope-based. It is really not deficit-based. Right? It speaks to the facts, but it also speaks to the possibilities of transforming those things, those situations. Because too often, it is about the children are the issue, and I say the children aren't the issue; it's the system and it's the structure that's the issue. But the question the last question you ask is really, yes, about implementation, and that's why I have got. So there are two things. The teacher who is in the midst of this situation is going to have a challenge because we don't give teachers enough planning time. We don't pay them enough, first of all. I said that. We don't pay them enough. We don't give them enough planning time. And we're not allowing teachers to do the very thing I just described, which is why I prefaced this with this whole collective identity, this collective thing. Because in schools, when I have worked on whole school transformation, when teachers are part of a cohort, a collective of teachers who spend time together, who work together, who problem solve together, who are part of a community that cares for one another and supports each other through these things, the transformation for a school can happen exponentially. When a teacher is isolated in the classroom by themselves, it becomes far more challenging because it's only your mind and your wherewithal and your tools and all that you have. But together, we amplify that, right? And so I'm saying that we can do a better job of giving teachers the time to plan and the time to work together in creative ways to problem solve collectively and collaboratively to amplify their individual impact. That's the first part. The second part is that while it is a challenge to try to figure out which of the cultural and healing elements do I bring in that's going to create transformation, you can always start with the two. And I give you a foundation of two, if you look at it, and that is culturally and linguistically responsive pedagogy. It says that whatever I do, I don't just pick any culture, but I look at who's in my classroom and I find a way to bring the truth, their story, their life, their history into the work so that the child feels seen, so that this amplifies and builds on their home life, their cultural life, their community life. And when I do that, the child has a different connection and a different relationship to learning. And so any teacher can begin there. The second thing is we talk about this notion of critical consciousness. I talked about Freire and critical consciousness. Critical consciousness and self-love begins with mindfulness. It begins with knowing how to stop the chatter, how to stop the oppressive narrative that you've been told, like I was told, and this played in my head for decades. It's a knowing how to stop that narrative and create a new narrative of your own choosing. And it starts with stillness. And in stillness, you can find a sense of relief, a sense of respite, and begin to get clear about what you see, what you perceive, and how you might challenge it. So those two things, culturally and linguistically responsive pedagogy and mindfulness, are the two things that you begin with. And then I do give one more strategy beyond the critical deep work that you need to do to know which things to incorporate, and that is the critical questions, right? Anybody can sit and ask 16 questions. You don't have to ask all 16 every lesson, but if let's see, one of the 16 questions is, how much am I talking? Seems like a simple question, but the truth is that's about power, and that's about agency, and that's about all these other elements, right? So when I ask that simple question is, how much am I talking and how much am I listening? That reminds the teacher to not be the sage on the stage, but instead to facilitate learning and dialogue and questions from the students. There are other questions that invite them into this work in a way that simply is like an on ramp, right? It's like a nice little on ramp before you do the critical deep work. Is just saying I can always ask these questions, and in doing so, I will automatically be creating a holistic, loving environment. But let me see. In order to do the critical questions that you're talking about, it happens in a group more often than with an individual, and you might need an expert like me. Who knows? I don't know.
Yes. So I just wanted to make sure we took an opportunity though to hear from you around how you're thinking about this framework and these pillars. You took so much time to really, you dug through, what did you say, 1,200 resources. That's a lot of work. And then just finally, I just wanted to say that, in your dissertation, you say a quote, an emancipatory pedagogy must center and uplift the concept of love as a path to freedom. Love is the new ingredient in a modern emancipatory education. And I just wanted to say, I love that. I love that you're highlighting. This is you.
I know. I wrote that.
You wrote that.
Oh my God.
And stating that plainly, I think is important, and it really centers the voice of what you're bringing into your work, and the fact that these pillars are not just some quick little doodads you could do, but you're really talking about centering that aspect. So thank you again. I see Andrew has a question.
Yeah. Just briefly, I love that you talked about mindfulness, because it actually is related to the question I wanted to ask. Not sure if you familiar with this book, but Pedro Noguera's book, City Schools and the American Dream, he talks about, this is around some of his work he was doing in Berkeley. And, he said one of the problems with school failure, right, again, kind of what you're saying, right, is it's not about students, it's not even necessarily teachers, but we do need to do better with teachers. Again, it is sort of a structural thing. And where your work is filling in on that is what he said is education, they become these centers that are compartmentalizations of our actual lives. So you go one place for your health and wellness, you go somewhere else for, food or whatever, although they do have some lunch programs, things like that, obviously. But that really, if we reform the way that schools look to include the spiritual, the health, that access to things they may not be able to get because there's no one home when they get out of school. And so a safe place. So really looking at a sort of more integrated approach to the different aspects of ourselves. So I was curious how you thought, maybe the pillars in this approach might actually be speaking to this idea of, maybe related to the first question I had asked you, of that structural change. How do you change these schools so that they're not just going to look at, we're here to educate you and that's it, our responsibility ends there, right? Because as your work is reflecting, right, we're the medicine to one another. And so how can you really be medicine to one another if you see students as products? And so I think that's partly what, your work's getting to. And the challenge is, I guess, getting schools and teachers and even students, right, to feel and have access to do what it is that your work is so eloquently kind of addressing.
Yes, this notion that we so often, when it comes to the learning paradigm at any age, any context, it's compartmentalized. You study biology, you study math, you study this other subject. And the fact is that one subject and another subject can be combined in interesting and innovative and creative ways that will amplify learning across all those subjects. What you speak to is that fact that schools are not just a place where I give you the basic skills of reading, writing, and arithmetic, but they become the schools. It should be the school of life. It should be the thing that gives you the tools of how to operate effectively in your community and in the world, in a global world, right? As we're talking about. One that can get along with any people from different walks of life, from different cultures, who understands the interconnectedness of culture and economies. And one of the ways that's going to happen, Andrew, is that we have to reorient this connection to family and community. It cannot happen otherwise. We must rethink the way we include and incorporate families, the way we support them, the way we weave them into this educational paradigm, the way that we amplify and give them the tools so that the things that students are learning in the classroom, they know exactly how to reinforce them in the home and vice versa. And this means that we have to change the fact that school is this thing that is separate from and different from being in society. It is an aspect of society. It is embedded in society. And in fact, we must incorporate this into society in a more holistic, meaningful, and loving way. I'm not just talking about like doing more shows and having parents come and sit in the audience and watch their kid do a show. I'm talking about teaching families what it means to learn, teaching families what it means to grow and develop a positive identity. It means that finding the tools that are needed to strengthen families, to strengthen home lives, so there is reduced trauma, which will impact everybody in a positive way. This is where the school should be a refuge for the entire community, not just for those student learners. And so this is part of the reform that I think is necessary and that I speak to in the dissertation as well.
And I think, Chip, that, that's going to have to be part of, to bring parents and others in, many of who have had a horrible experience in the educational system, to feel the comfort level there and to feel not only welcome but also respected, and that it's not sort of them coming into an environment that they may have experienced many years before, but one that's a partnership, right? So looking at the time, I think that what we're going to do now is, so the committee, we will go into a breakout room for a while, maybe 5 minutes or a little bit more. And so feel free, if anyone wants to engage with Chip in the meantime. And so Phil, are you going to put us into a breakout? And then how do we get back in?
You should be able to just come back on your own.
Okay, great.
Well, Chip, I will start out really quick by saying hello from Seattle. James Robinson here. I think we met during one of the term launches a while back, but I'm coming up on my last term of coursework before I go into my dissertation proposal. And so thank you. It has been an honor and a pleasure to be a part of this experience and journey with you. I take my hat off to you that Mika was able to join you today. I got teared up during some parts of your presentation. So my white husband, I know, would have been bawling all over this place if he were watching the presentation along with me. Because, your presentation would have certainly not only engaged his mind, but certainly pulled at his heartstrings in a way that would encourage him to continue his journey towards equity and leading a more anti-Black, anti-racist Black life. You know what I mean? And wait a minute, I said that wrong. And did I say that right? Anti-racist Black life. Good, there we go, got it. So then, I just wanted to say, I really appreciate the therapeutic approach that you brought to this presentation, because I can assure you mine will be nothing of the kind. I doubt anybody will be shedding any tears during my presentation, though, I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. But you really, really had such a human approach to your dissertation that really draws in a broad audience. And I really, really appreciate that, because I'm hoping that I can take away some of the tools that you employed today to reach some hearts and some minds. Amazing research and methodology. I'm going to be starting with the transdisciplinary approach myself. So I really appreciate you opening up a window for me and kind of helping to guide my process, as well as I will too be addressing educational inequities for Black and Brown folks. at the teacher practice and policy level, the main areas that I'm going to be looking at. So much of your presentation has provided a bit of a footprint for me today. I appreciate you relabeling the achievement gap, because the second it came up in your presentation, I thought, oh, here we go, because I'm going to be addressing it as well in my dissertation, only I'm going to be addressing it as the education equity gap.
Yes.
So I really appreciate that you too, put your own spin on it, because the achievement gap, achievement of what? Right? Achievement of what? And who's achieving it, and on whose terms and by what means, right? The achievement gap didn't just appear out of thin air. The achievement gap was created through inequitable and racist practices. And so we have, as you said, we have to name that, and we have to be able to build from that foundation by being honest about it instead of throwing pretty words and terms on it. As you know, this has happened all throughout history to justify and codify inequities against people of color by naming something like the education equity gap, the achievement gap, and so forth. The classroom to prison pipeline, let's just be real about it. What they mean when they say the classroom to prison pipeline is preparing Black boys to go to prison from the classroom and from childhood. That's what the prison to pipeline really means. So let's stop putting these fancy terms on things, and let's just be real, right? And be honest about what it really is, so that we can get to the heart of the matter and really find some solutions that are meaningful and will actually bring about the change that we're looking for in society and through humanity. And I really appreciate that. I'm going to leave on this note. I really appreciate that you implemented the element of love in what's needed for effective teaching, not just for Black individuals, but for all people. This term, I'm teaching a course called Child, Family, and Community. And in the Saturday class that I taught, I had several students speak up about how they appreciated the equitable approach and modality that I used for the class, because in other classes, they've experienced professors who are not equitable, who do not want to work with them, who set hard deadlines despite the fact that they're dealing with a pandemic and trying to figure out how to care for their children and families and losing jobs and such. They've had professors who have just been real hard asses. And so what started out to be, going over course content turned out to be that, in addition to some love and caring for each other and making space for each other to really share what we're going through and how we can support each other best in education. Because what's happening is that when teachers are imposing inequitable practices on students, that's how we lose students. That's how students drop out. That's how they lose their self-esteem and become discouraged, which several of my students expressed during this Saturday's class. And we're very grateful that I am not imposing those oppressive practices on them, but instead providing an equitable and loving and caring environment for them to learn and thrive. So thank you
so much.
Thank you.
Yes,
I appreciate
your kind words. I really appreciate it, James. I see sunshine.
Hey, darling. Oh my goodness, you nailed it. You nailed it. I'm so proud of you. It's such a beautiful, beautiful work. And I love how you have advanced the field in such a radical way. And I'm not surprised. That seems like your way to do things. Like, I'm going to bring it. And you did do that. My question, long time ago, has already been addressed somewhat relative to implementation. There was quite I wouldn't have called it that necessarily, but that's what your committee was talking about. I was kind of curious about your next steps relative to diving into this work, because I see this as a movement, and I know it's something that's going to take time since it's so embedded in a systemic way that it needs to be peeled back, multi-layered, different constituencies, and it just will take a lot of work. And I can't wait for you to read the chat. There's a lively chat around this when you get through. No, not now, but it's recorded. Be sure and dive into it, because there's a lot of commentary around what we think we'd like to see you doing in the world. And so I just wondered what you want to be doing in the world to help advance this work, and how to I want to say infiltrate, that's fine, integrate it into the system so that it does take hold. Because like you said, teachers, it's kind of hard to throw some questions at them to ask because, you know, they're already dealing with so much, and, you know, the principals need it, the school needs it, the parents need it, the teachers need, I mean, it's just so many layers to it. I could see you leading a movement of this type of work, but what are your what do you want to do with this going forward?
Thank you. Wow, that was a really good question. So the first thing is that in order for this work to be shared in the broadest possible way, I think it's got to get out of the dissertation form and become a book. So everybody who wrote the word book in there, that is absolutely my intention. I hope to have a draft even by the end of the year. So I'm really excited about that. I think that there's a lot. Remember that I told you it was 750 pages and I had to cut it down? I'm putting all that back in there. Because part of one of the stories I told you about my life, there's a lot more of that in there. There's a lot more of my story, and a lot more of my story as an exemplar for what has happened and what could possibly be in the future. You know, I'm lucky in that I've been doing this work. I am a practitioner. I teach teachers, and I work in some higher ed programs. And so my next step is really to look at the architects of those teacher education programs. And luckily I have connections to so many at Mills, Stanford, Harvard, and St. Mary's College of California, and so many others, Cal State East Bay. And I'm going to basically be taking this work to those teacher preparatory programs, to those architects, to those people who are creating those programs. And I want to talk and put forth this narrative about the kind of competencies that teachers need to teach children of color effectively. And I want to really propose a strategy for the ways that we can adapt and change teacher education programs to be more inclusive of these cultural and healing pedagogies. So, oh.
Hi there. I'm back. We're back. Your committee's back. So I was just listening to some of your conversation about what comes next in the book, and that was part of the conversation that we were having as well when we were in our breakout room. So, so congratulations, you have passed your dissertation defense with no revisions, and congratulations, Dr. McNeal.
Oh, yay!
Yeah!
Congratulations.
Yeah!
Go, Chip, go!
Bravo, bravo, bravissimo.
Yay,
So,
Dr.
that you're
Mazel tov.
just,
Congratulations, Dr. McNeal. Congratulations.
Go, Chip.
Let's just keep
so that little 5-year-old boy has a PhD now. So
Yes, he does.
good. So would Leslie or Andrew like to just say a word
Well,
behind them?
Dr. McNeal, I just want to congratulate you again for a job well done. You put your heart, your soul, your blood, your tears through a pandemic and and a racial reckoning. And you are a racial reckoning yourself in that you are prepared to do the work that you've set out. And so diligently, you attacked this work. So I just can't wait to see it come alive through you as it has already been, but so excited, and congratulations once again to you.
Doctor, felicidades, congratulations, doctor. This is, what an amazing work. What, as I said earlier, what a testimony that we all could be in ceremony with you today, and you preached and we loved it. And just one thing I want to, that we came up here when we came back in, is those 4 pillars. They each deserve their own sort of chapter. The book that, we are all, it's a book I think so many of us have been waiting for. So we look forward to that next part. But for now, just celebrate, and honor all those hours and all that commitment. Congratulations. Much love.
Speech.
Yes.
You know, I'm not often at a loss for words. But my heart is full. And I just want to let you know that everyone here to know that, as I said before, your love and your well wishes and your support has meant the world to me. I want to give a special thanks to the Echo Love Group, to my beautiful friends Eric and Dawn and Melanie and Julie and Phil. You are my heart and you are my bedrock. And I could not have gone on this journey without you. And Phil, who's been my study partner for years, each and every week we looked, and when we were down, we lifted each other up. When we felt like we were faltering, we gave each other the hope that we needed. My mentor and life coach, Diana Cohn, who has been by my side and helped me to continue this work when I thought it was not possible. For Dan Glenn, my writing coach, to my beautiful family. And I want everyone to know that I derive a great deal of hope and inspiration from one person individually, and that is my sister, Yolanda. I love her so dearly, and she has taught me the meaning of strength and perseverance and humor and black joy. And I want her to know that I am so proud to be your brother, and I am so proud to have you in my life, and I am so grateful for all that you teach me on a daily basis about what it means to be human. Thank you so much for your gifts. And thank you to all my friends who took time of their busy lives to come today. My heart is full, and I'm tired. Child, I'm tired. I feel like I can lay down the gauntlet. I got to go through technical edits, but I got to lay down the gauntlet.
Good for you.
Yeah. Michael, Leslie, Andrew, thank you.
Thank you. It was really an honor to work with you. And I just remember the first time I ever saw you. You were sitting like in Pacifica.
Yeah.
Kind of came through. And I think we were eating lunch. And I was like, you just have this presence about you. And they're like, everyone's like, oh, that's Chip. And I'm like, okay, I don't know who he is. But, and then you actually sat with me and I told you kind of what I do. And yeah. I don't know, we just immediately connected. And so it was really, so to see you now at this moment, I'm not surprised at all, but it was just, it was a great journey. So, and then of course it continues for you now that you're Dr. McNeal. So thank you all for being here, and thank you, Chip, for just a really wonderful presentation.
Good. Thank you. I'm going to hang out for a minute, you guys. Thank you, Michael. I remember that first day too. I remember. And one of the faces I saw on my first day was this woman called Dawn. And first of all, she was like extraordinarily beautiful. And then she turned out to be both smart and compassionate too. And she turned out to be one of my dearest friends. And
now she's weeping.
Hey, thank you.
Weeping.
Thank you.
This was so beautiful.
Thank you.
So beautiful.
Thank you, baby. Thank you so much. Hey, you guys, my rabbi is here. Where's my rabbi? Did she just leave? Oh my God. Totally have my rabbi here. And so many dear friends, Joe, I see Hannah, I see all of you. And I'm so glad. Louis, thank you for coming. Thank you all for taking your time to be with me today. Beautiful. Hi! And there's my Marilla. There's my mom-in-law. Oh my God, what an inspiration. What a love. What a love. What a love. Thank you so much.
Hey, Chip.
Yeah.
Yolanda has been listening the entire time.
Yeah.
And she loves you. And she's incredibly proud of you. And she can't wait to speak with you soon.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Hey, Eric, do you want to say something? My brother.
Great job, brother. So proud of you. And yeah, thank you for being the gift that you are. And I'm just a little numb from it. And just really grateful to be witness here with you. So love you.
Thank you. I appreciate you. So I asked Phil, my longtime study partner, to watch the chat, to name or notice anything that he saw. And I will have a chance to read the chat, but I just want to call Phil into the room, man. I love you so much.
I love you too, Chip. The chat is like another dissertation. there's so much. The discussion was super rich. There's of course lots of calls out to the book, lots of congratulations, but it's one of the richest chats I've seen. Like there's key ideas in there, key questions that further the inquiry. So I think when you get into that, you'll just, of course, there's the flood of love. So much love in here, Chip. You're just, yeah. I'm like Dawn. I'm just overcome.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Anybody else want to say anything? Go ahead and say go ahead, Louise. What you got to say, Louise? Come on, darling.
Chip, I feel like there's new hope for the world, honestly, and we all need it. And your book will be that. And it's also clear and it's also doable, and I'm inspired to listen and to also take action. So thank you. And I've been crying here too, so I'm with Dawn on that one. Just so happy and grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Hey, there's somebody I want you guys all to meet, and he's somebody who I love. Well, I love all of you, but I just want to call out my friend Ryan, who is one of my mentees, and I see Hannah and Clara, all of my students and mentees and proteges, and see what you guys are thinking, what you're feeling. What you want to say?
Oh, just lots of joy, and we've had the privilege of being with you on part of this journey. So just really grateful and full of joy for being here, and congratulations. I hope you take lots of naps.
Thank you. Thank you. Clara, you guys don't know, but Clara, you would never guess that Clara, this beautiful young woman who I taught, who I met at the San Francisco Opera, would become one of my proteges. And at some point she had this crazy idea of doing what I do for a living. And she got into Harvard, and she's graduating in about 2 minutes. Clara, how you feeling, darling?
I'm crying. I'm so proud of you. I know how hard you worked for this. And like you said, where I am now, what I'm doing now, it's all thanks to you. And I aspire to be an amazing educator just like you. Thank you for inspiring me and guiding me. I love you so much. I'm so proud of you. I'm so happy. These are happy tears.
Thank you, Clara. I'm proud of you too. I'm proud of you too. So much love here. Anybody who hasn't spoken who feels moved to do so?
Chip, Mecca has somebody that wanted to speak.
Bad Warrior, do you want to say anything?
Hi, Chip.
Oh my gosh. Hello.
We are sending our love from your South Dakota family here, and we are so proud and inspired by you, Dr. Chip McNeal. Thanks for letting us join you today and listen to you. We have Ben and Matt listening in the background, and so we just wanted to say we're so proud of you. We love you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to have had you here. So meaningful. Ah, my goodness. Oh my gosh, you guys are all my heroes. I never knew how much love I had in the world till I saw this screen. At one point, I'm like, this is all the love in the world that I have all around me. Hey, Hannah, what do you want to say?
I first want to congratulate you. You've worked so hard. And I also just want to recognize how lucky we all are that you teach us and you challenge us. That's the biggest piece, that not only are you teaching us, you're challenging us. And your empathy for our own lives, but hold us accountable too. And I am forever grateful that you have been my mentor for so many years and that you've made me a better educator. You've made me a better parent. You've made me a better human. And I imagine that I could speak for a lot of people here. Thank you, thank you, thank you for educating and challenging us so much. And for all our babies, thank you for all of the things that they're going to get from your work. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Lua.
Ditto on all of that. And I've expressed myself a bit in the chat, but I just have to say, the power of your delivery, as always, is right there in partnership with the quality of your scholarship and the creativity of your vision. And I hope that some of what you recorded today will somehow be like, the video jump out from your book or something, because you are such a convincing performer and speaker and educator that, your story is, all of it is terrifically presented and very accessible for all of us. So I'm hoping that more people get to hear all of that.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Hey, Sydney, I did it. We can't hear you right now. She'll figure out how to unmute.
I figured it out. I am so proud of you, Chip. You are amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
I saw the whole thing.
Ah, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm so proud of you, Chip. You're just, I really learned a lot about you too. So it was really an eye-opener for me. But you're an amazing person, very bright. And that's why you got to this level.
Thank you.
Are you proud of yourself?
I will be soon. I am completely numb.
I was gonna say, are
I'm
you
just
exhausted?
numb. I don't know. I'm barely in my body.
Yeah.
In this moment. Yeah.
Well, look at, you're getting lots of, am I online with a bunch of people, or is it just?
No, you're online with a few. There's still a few people here just sitting, hanging out, loving.
Okay.
Visiting.
Okay. Yeah, I saw the whole thing, and then I have no words.
Thank you.
And I got lost in some of it because I don't think I understood a lot, especially when you were engaging with the other professors in your team. But for the overall, the larger message, I definitely got.
Thank you.
The most important one.
Yeah. They ask hard questions. That's why. Those were not just lobbed like little questions.
Yeah.
For anybody who knows that, those were serious big questions. So
I thank you for saying that, because boy, I was like, what?
No, that's the hard work, right? Listening so critically that you can pick out what the inquiry is.
Yes, and they did too.
Yeah. Yeah.
They got you good. Did you put on lots of deodorant?
I did. Oh my God. No, it's so hot here. You don't even know. Anyway, thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'm sure you're you've got other people you need to chat with, but very proud of you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. I'm remembering I forgot to thank somebody. Oh my gosh, Jean Oggins is my editor. I told you it takes a village. And she's the one who took that 750-page thing and said, Chip, I think we need to pare that down a little bit.
Oh,
and I
yeah.
just say, Jean, this is what we did. Look at what we did. Thank you so much for your contribution and for your support. And I do want to, Marilyn, did you want to say anything? Did you want to say any words?
There we go. Hi, Han. I'm so proud of you. Thank you for teaching me a lot. I learned quite a bit from today, and I am so proud of you. You've worked so hard, and you've come to fruition of this wonderful moment in your life. You have a lot of love, as you can see, and this is just great. I'm excited for you, Chip. You need to be out there and teaching everybody with your book. And you have always been a very good person for giving us information, for sharing a lot of life experience that a lot of us have and gone through, but don't know how to express it. And I want to thank you for bringing that out about your life and what you've gone through. Not only did I feel your pain as you were talking about it, but some of your sisters, your aunties, I should say, my sister-in-laws and your aunties were saying to me on my my cell phone how much you meant to them, and how your Aunt Margaret was saying she was quite impressed, and everyone was drawing tears saying how much you touched them in your presentation. So thank you, sweetheart. Thank you. And I'm just so excited to throw a party for you.
Thank you, Mom. Thank you so much.
Chip, this is Aunt Sandy.
Yes.
Thank you so much. My 33 years in education, including some university professorships, have come to this point of thinking, oh my gosh, there's hope. There's hope, and you're it. So you sprinkle that stardust, sir. Sprinkle that stardust. Thank you.
Thank you, Aunt Sandy. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you guys for just holding. Dan, man, thank you so much for being here. Really means a lot to me.
It's an honor, and I'm so moved and so inspired by you. So I just appreciate you so much. Congratulations.
Thank you. So you guys know who Dan Glenn is. He's a writing coach. And I remember my first coaching session that happened probably in this, I don't know what year it happened, but I remember saying, so how does this writing thing work? Like this writing a paper, like, how does it work? Literally. I'm like, well, what do you do? And he basically gave me the foundation for that. So I owe a lot of my scholarship to you, my friend. No small thing.
You're too kind. You're too kind.
No, it's real. It's real. It's all so amazing. So many people have contributed to this moment. So, wow, I am ready for a little break, and I'm going to just call it time. If there's anybody who hasn't said anything but who wishes to speak, go ahead, Micah. Unmute.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure if you saw, but Arnaud Boissière, who is the head of research at a small university in the outskirts of Paris, has been attending the entire time. And he wrote in the chat, congrats, Dr. Charles Chip McNeal. Besides your book coming out soon, looking forward to welcoming you around the Eiffel Tower for a conference on your work here in Paris. With love, Arnaud and Vince.
Oh my God. Arnaud.
International audience.
Oh, Arnaud, thank you so much for coming. Oh my goodness.
It's the CII Paris Université, CY Paris Université.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I've got my friends. I've got my family from South Dakota. I've got my international friends. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. I'm full. I'm full and I'm so grateful. And yeah, just want to take a moment and just breathe and into this moment. Um, if I have not told the people who are looking at me right now on this screen, I love you. I love you, and I am grateful for you in my life. Emiko, thank you so much for being here. Joe, Sam, all of you, the Bensons, Lisa. You guys, so grateful. So grateful. And with that, I am going